Whether you operate one forklift or thousands, one location or hundreds, the new My Toyota customer portal can help you optimize your operation and material handling equipment. This one-stop, free-to-use platform is designed to help you take control of your information and make smarter decisions, all at the touch of a button. Register and access your data today at my.toyotaforklift.com. That's my.toyotaforklift.com.
The New Warehouse Podcast, hosted by Kevin Lawton, is your source for insights and ideas from the distribution, transportation, and logistics industry. A new episode every Monday morning brings you the latest from industry experts and thought leaders. And now, here's Kevin.
Hey, it's Kevin Lawton with the New Warehouse Podcast, bringing you a new episode today. And on today's episode, I am going to be joined by Brendan Feeney. He is the Director of Sales for North America for Linnworks. And we're going to talk all about Linnworks, how it's helping to increase visibility on multiple different levels through the fulfillment process, both on the brand side, also on the shipper side, whether it's 3PL, e-commerce. We're going to talk about all those things and how Linnworks kind of ties everything together, creates that visibility. And we're also going to dive into a lot of complexities that have come into the market as we see multiple different platforms for people to be able to sell through. And we'll touch a little bit on social commerce too, which I think is a pretty interesting topic. But we're also going to talk about the exciting Skubowl. So we know about the Super Bowl. We know about the Puppy Bowl. Well, we're going to bring the Skubowl here, and we're going to talk about what Linnworks is doing around that and how they can potentially step up your game, I guess, in the Super Bowl party department a little bit. So, Brendan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing great, Kevin. Doing great. Thanks for having me. Very excited for the conversation today and look forward to, I think this is some really interesting topics for the audience that you have at play. So I'm excited to get into it.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to have you on. Happy to learn more about Linnworks here too as well, and talk about some of these topics as you mentioned. I think are very interesting and very timely as well. So before we dive into any of that stuff, why don't you give us just a brief overview of Linnworks, what it is you guys do, where you focus, all that stuff.
Sure. Yeah, so Linnworks, been in business in 17 plus years, global company, but essentially best way to simplify it, we're a connected e-commerce ops platform. So we're really the orchestration layer to provide kind of any brands between 1 million up to 100 million from having the ability to connect to multiple channels. So their website, various marketplaces, retailers, be able to kind of synchronize their inventory levels, manage their orders, their forecasting. And then the key thing is helping them do that fulfillment side, whether it be with 3PLs, whether it be within their own warehouse, but truly that end-to-end kind of back-end experience from when a customer makes that purchase. It's all the stuff that's happening behind the scenes. That's really where Linnworks is coming in with our solution capabilities.
Touching on a little bit of everything there. I'm curious, would you guys, supply chain, we love our acronyms, right? I mean, would you categorize you guys as like a specific type of system?
Yeah, I would say from an acronym perspective, I would say IMS, OMS, WMS. I think we kind of fall within those three. We have some other unique things where we can do that kind of listing and product management, kind of play with some of those other solutions, but truly boiling it down, I think that IMS, OMS, WMS is the best way to describe us.
All right, great. Very interesting and good to put that kind of into perspective as well. And, touching on all those back end functions, like you said, is certainly an interesting thing. And I think certainly touching on all those things involves a lot of SKUs as well, which I'm sure where the idea for the Skubowl came into place, right? So tell us a little bit about the Skubowl, what that is and how people can participate and take advantage of that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Skubowl, a really exciting kind of idea spun out of our marketing team, where this year, kind of layering on, kind of piggybacking with the Super Bowl, we're putting out a lot of great kind of industry insight videos of best practices we've seen from our team on working directly with warehouse managers and working with warehouse teams. So there's a series of various different videos. If attendees out there go and check out those videos, you get a kind of badge or kind of card from each one that you watch. You're able to get into a raffle. I think it's only 4 of them really that you need to keep track of. And then We're going to run a drawing, and then we will love the opportunity for anyone that wins that. We're going to fund their Super Bowl party. So doing something really kind of interesting this year. Folks can get kind of that knowledge, things that might level up their game, thinking about 2024 within their warehouse, while also maybe getting the benefit of getting a really sweet Super Bowl party for their friends and family.
Awesome. Yeah. I think that's such a great idea. I think that's really cool as well. And I'm very interested to check that out myself and enter here too, maybe potentially. But we would love for one of the new warehouse listeners to win definitely and see what kind of party they have. I think that's such an awesome thing. And I think it's going to be a potentially interesting Super Bowl as we kind of look at the teams involved at the time that we're recording this. So we'll see how it's going to end up, but definitely very interesting to find out about that. And what types of, I guess, the videos, I mean, you said they're kind of focused on best practices. Are there any maybe favorites that you have that you want to call out?
Yeah, so we just recently had our first one launch on our site as effectively us kind of recording this today. And it kind of goes into one of our solution engineers getting interviewed from our team about kind of the complexity with how you have to think about building your tech stack to support your warehouse operations, where you want to be really thoughtful that you don't want to overcomplicate the stack and kind of build too much, but you want to really have the key components that you need to drive the most efficiency across your team. So I think it's kind of going into things that we've learned firsthand from folks that have gone through that manual process of doing a lot of things with paper and kind of printing things out via PDF to then going more to the digital and then taking it to the next step, bringing more sophistication, I think, for their warehouse. So that's going to be what the first one's about. There's going to be some other ones with some of our product experts coming, but each one will have a different kind of look and flavor about a specific area of the warehouse operation that I think will be interesting for folks.
Very interesting, and I'm definitely interested to check those out. So very exciting stuff. And the Skubowl, certainly be sure to enter, and we'll put some additional information about that at thenewwarehouse.com too as well for people. But yeah, Brendan, let's dive into the topics today on the podcast here. So I think, you kind of mentioned in there some of those different steps of evolution within the fulfillment process, and going from certain types of files to other files, and making sure that, all those things are kind of tying together. But, let's touch, I think, on, when we look at the landscape now, if you're selling a product online, right, there's so many different platforms, so many different marketplaces right now in play to be able to sell through as an e-commerce seller. Talk to us a little bit about, how has that kind of presented some challenges for managing the warehouse fulfillment and logistics side versus, how maybe a few years ago, several years ago, wasn't maybe as many platforms out there?
Yeah, so I think that's been one of the really unique things about the changing of consumer behavior and expectations, that folks want to go wherever they want to go in terms of their shopping experience, whether it be on marketplaces, browsing different websites. And now it's been incumbent upon brands to then meet consumers where they're spending that time so that they can acquire new customers, get that sale, but also just be present in areas that folks are shopping. I think that's brought in some interesting challenges down from like a fulfillment logistics perspective, because now instead of maybe a couple of years back, it's maybe my website, maybe I had an Amazon or eBay. Now there's a lot more channels on top of that. So figuring out, how do I not only kind of keep our inventory up to date as our sales are happening, but how do I also make sure that depending upon the channel it came from, how are we fulfilling that in a timely manner that's meeting what the channel is asking for? Every customer is going to have a different expectation where they're shopping of how quickly that order is going to get to them, what that experience is going to be like, because when you are selling on the Amazon or Walmarts of the world, those are Amazon's customers. Those are Walmart's customers. So you have to make sure that you're abiding to that experience and really making sure that they want to come back and shop with you again. So I think really the things that I see are, when it does come to that channel and it does come down into the team, how do they ensure that that team knows how quickly they need to turn that order around from a pick pack perspective? How fast are they getting it out the door? And then what was that shipping method the customer decided? Was it 2-day shipping? Is it ground shipping? And how am I adhering to the customer's expectations there? I think that's been more unique. I think that in the past, it may have been one or two options typically, and now there's more options for how people want to ship, how people quickly really want to get their order, if they want to pay more for it or less for it. So I think that's run a few different variances for the back end teams in the warehouse.
Yeah, it's very interesting. And I love that you said in there that, it's not necessarily like if somebody orders from Walmart through Walmart or through Amazon, like that's Walmart and Amazon's customer, right? Even though like you're putting your product on their platform and like you're selling through their platform, it's not necessarily directly your customer, right? And I think that's such an interesting point there. And certainly there's a lot of different requirements and things that, those, especially Amazon for sure, requires of the way things are packaged or labeled and things like that. So when you're dealing with multiple different platforms like that, it can obviously become a challenge on the fulfillment side. So how do kind of these warehouse companies, maybe 3PLs kind of manage through this? And, maybe how does Linnworks help in that sense too as well?
Yeah. So when it comes to, and you made a great point about different label that they have to adhere to, or different ways that Amazon wants those boxes sent out or Walmart wants those boxes sent out. Mm-hmm. I think where Linnworks comes into play is we can provide a bit more simplicity to having those labels be able to kind of batch create by channel if you want to, or by shipping carrier, or having ways that it makes it easier on the warehouse teams that they can just go based on certain ways they want to bucket out these orders to then work through in a more seamless way. So if I'm sitting in the warehouse and I just want to go through the Walmart orders, we're going to go through those quickly. I know they're all going to have a similar type of kind of picking kind of motion. I know they're going to have a similar label type. I know they're going to have a similar kind of shipping delivery time. So that's one thing. I think the other area, which is really interesting, is where Linnworks can provide the flexibility of options. I think some customers as well will lean on the marketplaces themselves for fulfillment providers. We've seen popularity with Amazon FBA, Walmart Fulfillment Services, WFS. So having that ability that if you want to work with the channel specifically, that you can send those orders off to them and then they'll take care of the fulfillment. So then you have the options. I think brands start to sit back and think, okay, analyzing our profit margins, do we want to use Walmart or Amazon, or do we see it being better for us to manage that in-house and we'll fulfill those orders? And those are decisions every company, I think, has to think through. But with Linnworks, you have the options, which I think is great. With other solutions out there too, just having a way to figure out where you want to send orders to which location, I think that's what gives you a bit more control on how to handle those type of channels too.
Interesting. Yeah. And I think that's such a great thing. And, especially in the environment that we're in now from, I guess consumer really is the one that's ultimately driving it. Right. I mean, it's, right. We need to have that flexibility, and that flexibility is such a key to be able to, not only on the fulfillment side, whether it's, the brand fulfilling themselves or, fulfilling through, a channel partner or a 3PL, whatever the case may be, there needs to be that flexibility to do the right thing to deliver on that customer experience overall. But I'm curious, while we're kind of on the topic of these different platforms and marketplaces and things, let's talk a little bit about the social commerce aspect, right? Because TikTok Shop, right, certainly has exploded in a way here in the last, I guess, year and a half or so now. So tell us a little bit about kind of the additional layer of complexity a platform like that can add to a fulfillment process.
Yeah, I think TikTok Shop is going to be an incredibly exciting marketplace for brands this upcoming year. We were early to launch with them in their UK, TikTok Shop UK, and very common to kind of test out strategy in Europe before bringing it over into America. And we saw it across our customers that it had significant growth and significant order volume increase when they were getting on TikTok Shop. I think you meet some interesting demographic in terms of millennials, Gen Z, different folks that are really spending a ton of time on that platform. But also the complexity level is, with TikTok, as we've seen, there is this virality to it. If something all of a sudden gets really popular, everyone's jumping in a quick span of time to buy things. So that does cause a strain on warehouse teams where maybe we're typically used to seeing kind of a couple hundred orders or a couple thousand orders a day, where all of a sudden TikTok alone could do 5,000 orders in a matter of a few hours. So there could be big waves that come really quickly. And we've seen this with folks doing TikTok lives or having some type of promotion, and then they drive it through TikTok Shop. And then I think the challenge is, well, we need to make sure that we have enough inventory on hand, that we're not creating a disjointed customer experience where they're trying to buy with us and we can't fulfill that order. But furthermore, being ready for that kind of uptick in volume that could come pretty quickly. And is our pickers enabled in a way that they can fulfill those orders in a timely manner? How do we kind of support that uptick in volume? And I think that's another thing that a lot of brands will have to think about this year is, as much as the benefit comes with a rapid uptick in sales, how do we make sure it's a really great customer experience with our warehouse team to fulfill that based on when they expect to get it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's it's exciting, definitely, space and the way things can take off on there, but it is kind of like you mentioned, it's like, maybe you're doing, X amount of orders in a day or a week. And then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, right, something takes off on TikTok and it's everywhere, right? And now all of a sudden you're doing your weekly volume in a couple hours, like you said, or maybe in some cases your monthly volume in like a day, right? It can get wild. So, it's definitely something I think where, there's a lot of complexity on being able to pivot and understand like how to do that. Even from like just a labor perspective on the fulfillment side, like, how are we even just going to get this many orders out in a day, right? But like you said, maintaining that customer experience, I think is super critical. And I think as we look at that customer experience as well, certainly there's a lot of companies that have move towards more of a kind of a distributed inventory approach and try to spread out their inventory positioning to be closer to those consumers, whether it's, working with a 3PL that has multiple locations or multiple 3PLs or, shipping yourself and having multiple warehouses, micro fulfillment in some cases, all those different things. But, when you look at that and you try to manage that, it certainly adds additional complexity, right? I think we're talking a lot about complexity here today, right? It seems like, but fulfillment logistics is not an easy thing, right? Especially when we're looking at e-commerce and higher volume, virality, as you mentioned too. So how do, companies go about coming up with a strategy and a plan and I guess infrastructure too, to know where should I send that order, right? Should that order comes in, like, should it ship out of my East Coast 3PL? Should it ship out of my West Coast 3PL, Midwest 3PL, South 3PL, depending on how many different nodes you have in your network? How do you really set that up to be able to do that and have that proper inventory positioning?
We'll be back after a quick break.
You hear a lot about supply chains these days, because if the past couple years have taught us anything, it's that an efficient, well-managed supply chain is absolutely critical to keeping businesses successful and consumers happy. I'm Will Haywood, and I host a podcast called All Business, No Boundaries, where we talk about supply chains, how they work, what happens when they don't, and the innovations that are redefining what's possible in the world of logistics. Join me for insightful interviews with thought leaders and industry experts. We discuss how optimizing supply chains can break down the barriers that are holding businesses back. That's All Business, No Boundaries by DHL Supply Chain. Listen and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
Yeah, there's some layers to this one too, which is I love that we're getting into this. So, and this is something I talk about frequently with kind of head of warehouse teams or head of logistics, supply chain, chief operations officers. Essentially, when it comes down to it, I think you need to really look at where your customers are and understanding the data around your customers. What is the geolocation that they're typically represented across? Do you have more heavily weighted on East Coast, West Coast? Do you have a good amount in the Midwest? I think that's really like the initial launch pad to figure out where do we need to have our fulfillment centers and where does it make sense for us? From there, one of the common things I'm seeing right now is a lot of customers want to try to fulfill from the closest location to that customer, not only from a cost of shipping perspective, but also a time of delivery that can get there quicker to the customer versus from sending it kind of across the coast. So one of the common things we see is customers building out rule sets to run across their orders almost like a decision tree, if you will, that based on where this order is coming in from, based on the customer location, first check the warehouse that's closest to them. If we have an inventory available there, let's fulfill it from that location. If we don't, then let's then go down the decision tree of what is the next closest location we could fulfill it from. So that's typically what I'm seeing right now being a very effective strategy, that the idea of how do we have a really sophisticated order routing strategy that focuses on where our customers are, the channel that they're coming from, the closest location I can fulfill it from, so that really it's giving a great experience. Again, I know getting back to the experience thing, but I think it's so critical. So many folks are making purchasing decisions today based on how quick they're going to get an item. If I'm going to get it in a couple of days, or if I'm going to get it 2 weeks later, that's going to influence if I'm going to purchase something or not. So having the ability to send that to a location that's nearby them, that could fulfill within 1 or 2 days, I think it will make you more profitable with kind of your overall, what your expenses are from kind of sending it out from a shipping side of things. But also you're going to make that customer far more happier because they're going to get it in a timely manner. And I think that's overall the end game that a lot of folks are after.
Yeah. Yeah.
Sure. I was going to say, what I've also seen pretty unique there, Kevin, is that I've seen too, I'm sure you probably maybe talked this on a different other podcasts you had, is also the BOPIS, where we've seen some, depending on vertical, where we can now use our own brick and mortar locations to fulfill it from as well. So buy online, pick up in store. I know we're talking about, we've been going to marketplaces, but if it's like within your own website or shop front, that's another area I think of, hey, when we talk about order routing or getting it to the right place, we can even send it to in their town if they have a brick and mortar store there, and they can go pick it up in person if they want to. Again, it's just the options, which I think is great.
Yeah. And I think that's such a great thing to point out too, as well, with the BOPIS there, as you mentioned, the buy online, pick up in store, because I mean, honestly, like, a couple of years ago, pre-pandemic, it was very rare that option was available, right? I mean, for a lot of companies, like once you send inventory to the store, like it was only available at the store, right? I mean, there wasn't really like the opportunity to take advantage of your whole inventory in that way online. But I think, it's interesting that, it's so important to be able to kind of have that inventory positioning and being able to, like you said, deliver better on that customer experience. Because I think, especially as, people are concerned about economic things and things like that, a bad customer experience, especially, when they're buying something that's maybe a little higher ticket or something that, they need, not necessarily immediately, but they maybe want it faster for a specific reason. Being able to have that flexibility and create that great customer experience could be, the difference maker in having a customer in the first place or not. And then also having a repeat customer as well, right? So being able to do that is certainly important. But with that comes a lot of sophistication, right, and complexity. So, it's great that there's, systems like Linnworks that can help to alleviate some of those complexities and make it a little easier. But I'm curious around from the visibility perspective, right? If I'm a brand and, I'm having a fulfillment business myself, I've talked to a couple brands actually pretty recently where, they're shipping nationwide out of the West Coast, for example, only, right? One shipping point. And obviously, they're shipping to the East Coast, super expensive, right? Because they're shipping across the country. So, when brands are able to get visibility around this, I guess first, how can they get visibility around this, seeing that like, okay, we're at a point where we need to look at having a second shipping point, or we need to look at having a third shipping point, right? How do they get that visibility in the first place? And how do they know like it's time to expand that network a little bit?
Yeah, that's great. So I think that first you talk about the inventory visibility and having that positioning. I think always knowing what you have at your fulfillment center at any given point in time, and then keeping track of kind of what is my typical daily average velocity of how much I sell all my given SKUs. So I know I can be ordering on time, replenishing on time, making sure we never are leaving stock on the table or overstocking. I think it's a big thing folks focus on, is trying to be a leaner e-commerce team this year and being really cost controlled. But then to your point, if you have one primary warehouse location at the moment, and you start to identify that you're having to send it oftentimes all the way across to the other coast, or you're sending it frequently where it's becoming very costly for the shipping that you're having to do to get to the end consumer. I think that's where I kind of goes back to what I mentioned earlier in the conversation about really looking at the customer data. Like, what is my representation of my customers? Where are they? Where is that breakdown exist from a geo perspective? What I typically see being the first kind of leapfrog for most teams is getting that East Coast, West Coast location. I don't see folks typically jump to the Midwest initially. I see them do both coasts so they can cover kind of both sides, and then they can fill from either one into the middle of the country. That's what I see being the initial kind of step, I think, to that second fulfillment center or second location. I think there's another opportunity as well if folks don't want to take on that burden themselves, where you have to go and hire a warehouse team, warehouse manager, pickers, and everything, to then seek up perhaps a 3PL. If you want to have diversification, if you want to still have a presence over in a different side of the U.S., but not necessarily have to kind of build out the whole entire infrastructure around that you can look at other options there, whether it be that kind of 3PL strategy to further kind of stretch your network of what you can fulfill across.
Yeah, very interesting. And I think that's such a great point too. And I think it makes sense to look at East, West Coast, especially East Coast. I'm in Jersey, you're in Connecticut. We know Northeast is, one of the most densely populated areas in the country, right? So certainly a lot of potential customers there, right? But yeah, I mean, it's such a important thing to look at. And I think having that visibility certainly increases the ability to make those decisions better, right? Because like you said, a lot of companies are trying to, operate with a lean team, which is, understandable, and trying to keep those costs down. But at the same time, if you look and you have better visibility into that data, and you can, get better insights into your shipping costs and where your customer is really located at, then you can make better decisions on the positioning of that inventory itself. And you mentioned something there too about, concerns about, having overstock, right? And when you start to get into multiple different shipping locations, that's definitely something that could potentially happen. There's like a greater risk, I would say, right? Because you want to try and keep both places in stock. Now you're managing more than one stock level. How do you balance that out? Do you have to, transfer to one location and to make sure you're still getting that strategy in play? How, like, if you were to look at Linnworks, for example, I mean, like, how would Linnworks help you kind of better navigate that and try to prevent that from happening?
Yeah. So the great part about our platform, I would say, I think one thing customers love is that they can have that kind of bird's eye view visibility into my inventory across all of my locations. Not only do I want to see my roll up, but give me the breakdown warehouse by warehouse, what I have, what my typical sell through is at that location. And then do we have any stock incoming in, or do I need to think about working with our supply chain team or our demand planning team about that reordering process to keep up with that? To your point, I think that is a challenge for so many teams and that's why I think the warehouse transfers come in play, because all of a sudden, if let's say some folks have inventory coming in from overseas, maybe they get it in at like that East Coast location, then they got to distribute it accordingly. Or if we've somehow overstocked at our kind of Midwest location, do I need to do a transfer over to our West Coast? Because that's where we're seeing the most uptick of recent customers that we're having purchased from us. So I think it's keeping an eye on going back to, okay, not only just where my customers are, but where are we acquiring new customers today? Where are those areas? And also constantly looking at that inventory level on a location by location basis to know if you need to get ahead of any of those transfers. That, hey, if we are a bit overweighted at one location, but we're typically seeing more uplift coming from our East Coast, let's make sure we can send that over to them in time so we can work through that stock accordingly. But the great part, I think, too, that just, again, to make it a bit simplified for teams, is you'll be able to see what your kind of forecasting data is on a warehouse by warehouse basis. And I say that because you're going to sell differently across each warehouse, and you should fulfill differently and replan differently for each warehouse. So I think getting that strategy down is what makes it a lot easier for teams to not run into those overstocking issues.
Yeah, I think that's really great, and I think having the visibility and the insight, as you mentioned there, and like you said, by the location, the warehouse level too, then you're understanding that, like, okay, now, it's not just telling me, hey, I need to order 1,000 more of whatever. And, I have to figure out, how much am I going to send here? How much am I going to send here? Right. So I mean, I think that gives you like even better insight into that. So now if we look on like the shipper side, like if you're utilizing a 3PL fulfillment partner, how can those on that side, I guess on that side of the table, right? I mean, how can they leverage Linnworks to be able to ensure that they're going to be now hitting all of these SLAs within all of these layers of complexity we've just talked about, right?
Yeah. So when it comes to 3PLs, so we actually work with a number of them that even use our technology. But when customers want to connect the 3PL in, our goal to get with that visibility is to have that direct connection into our system so we can see live inventory feeds. So we can see those live levels if it was just like their own warehouse, and they can see what they have across that 3PL and if they know if they have to do any reordering. But to your point, I think it also comes down to, have we talked with our 3PL about those SLAs for the channels of how quickly they can turn that fulfillment time around? Can my 3PL fulfill within a 1-2 day window? Are they more kind of typically common use to doing more of like a 2 to 3 day or 5 day? So then identifying, okay, which channels can I actually send orders to that I'm going to be adhering to these SLAs and the 3PLs can support for me? Because some 3PLs can be better at really kind of more like on like a subscription business and doing big volume, and some of them are really good at that shipping delivery time and getting it out within a 1 or 2 day window. So finding the strength of your 3PL, matching how that aligns with the channel you're selling on. Are the SLAs kind of in lockstep there, I would say, between what the channel expects, what the 3PL can deliver upon? That, I think, is what you need to figure out to make sure that you're sending them to the right 3PL based on that criteria.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I think that's such a great thing, and being able to leverage the technology, I guess, on both sides. Like you said, some 3PLs are using Linnworks, and I think that makes a big difference, because it's such an important thing, I think, for the brand and the 3PL to have that kind of partnership and open communication to make sure that things are going the right way. Like the brand should be treating that 3PL as the extension of their business, essentially, right? And being able to get that data and that input that they need to make decisions on your behalf is such an important thing too, to be able to hit those SLAs, right? And do those types of things. So very interesting stuff with you here, Brendan, and really appreciate you coming on and talking to us all about this. And we're certainly excited for the Skubowl as well. So if people are interested in learning more about Linnworks and they're interested in the Skubowl and seeing those videos and getting those entries in to potentially have their Super Bowl party funded by Linnworks, what's the best way to do that?
Yeah, so best way, just come right to the website, www.linnworks.com. You'll see it right there when you come in. There's a bunch of kind of pushing promotion around Skubowl. Definitely get in and participate. It's really not too much of a heavy lift for folks to kind of dive in, check out the quick videos, get those different badges, and then participate in the raffle. I really think it's going to be a great thing for whoever can get that funded Super Bowl party this year, not only to kind of be the talk of the neighborhood with whoever you got to kind of bring over, but also not have to worry about the financial cost of hosting and having a good time at the Super Bowl, which we know should be based on who's left right now, should be fun to see who kind of ends up at the big dance.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll definitely put all that information at thenewwarehouse.com as well. Make sure you enter that Skubowl. You get to learn something in the process, and then you can enter too and get that Super Bowl party funded. We'll be looking forward to as well seeing who wins that and seeing what they do with the funds. I think slip and slide would be cool, right? A Super Bowl party potentially, right? Something like that. So yeah, definitely. So Brendan, I want to thank you once again for coming on the show today, and we'll definitely put all the information about Linnworks at thenewwarehouse.com.
You've been listening to the New Warehouse Podcast with Kevin Lawton. Subscribe and check us out online at thenewwarehouse.com.
Thank you for listening to this episode. If you want more content from the New Warehouse, check out our new video series called All Hands on LinkedIn. Just search for the New Warehouse on LinkedIn and follow along.